Wouldn't you say that Trump has really been the best thing? Even if you say he's not the best thing for America, he's definitely been the best thing as far as the crypto space is concerned.
Like, don't like the guy. I think he's...
I used to think that Bitcoin was a total scam. How do you think then building Bitcoin as generational wealth for your children, is that something that you're thinking about?
The generational wealth is important to, obviously, because it's a great lifestyle and stuff too, but
I haven't seen anything coming out of the Labor Party in Australia regarding anything to do with Bitcoin. I think we're going to be left behind.
I always just thought that is some kind of crap that's going to catch up with people, and people are going to lose everything. Oh my God.
I'm Matthew Fraser, and this is Crypto Collective. After making millions with Amazon and e-commerce, I realized that if I was starting again today, crypto would be my first choice. I'm here to help you take your first steps and build real wealth. Ready to set yourself up for life? Let's go. Okay, Matt. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on the Crypto Collective podcast. It's great to have you here. How you doing?
Thanks for inviting me. I'm doing great. Yeah, this
awesome.
is very exciting.
Of course it is. It's on the Crypto Collective podcast. It's the #1 podcast. It's taking the world by storm. Hey, listen, I want to jump into our relationship so people who are watching this know that we actually met each other back in Amazon days. This is when we were both doing an Amazon course. We were selling on Amazon USA. And as far as I went on and used my profits from Amazon to buy Bitcoin. You've gone off and done some other things. What are you doing at the moment?
Right now I'm running a YouTube channel, basically what I do, but I'm investing heavily in Bitcoin and other things.
Right. So you're doing something in the AI space?
Yeah. So my niche on my YouTube channel is AI music, but that's sort of morphed from just doing a huge exploration about AI tools and learning what AI is and trying things out and showing people on YouTube what they are. And actually that's really morphed into using AI to help figure out different investing platforms and where to invest my Bitcoin and when to and how to spread it out.
Oh, that's interesting. We'll have to come back to that later because I want to dig deep into AI and what it's perhaps doing in your investing space. Tell us about how you discovered Bitcoin.
I want to say you, because it's good for the podcast. Like
That's not true.
You were a big bump in it, to be fair, but it's an interesting thing because I'll just go back to my lack of knowledge for my whole life and how it's sort of grown, and I've always tried to get smarter on things. And I suppose back in 2017, I had a friend of mine who was heavily investing in different crypto at the time, and up until 2017, I always just thought that is some kind of crap that's going to catch up with people, or people are going to lose everything. Oh my God. But pretty much like most investing thing, like I had no idea about it. I'm like you, I've read like Rich Dad Poor Dad and all those things, and all those and you get sort of parts of it, right? If you haven't grown up and really thought about how to do wealth generation, you get parts of it. And I was never confident enough to think for myself up until 2017. So a friend of mine was making money on different crypto, and he's like a really good friend, right? He's like, oh, you got to do this and do this and do this. And I didn't really know anything about anything. And this was like at the peak of 2017 when everybody's making a ton of money. And he had been making money for months and watching it grow up. And he goes, dude, I'll send you like $5. You can get your CoinSpot account opened up, and that's how you do it. And I'll blah, blah, blah. And I went, oh, okay. So I put, I don't know, like $600 into I think Litecoin at the time was I put the majority of it. Mm-hmm. And then I think 2 days later is in 2017 when everything just dropped out like crazy until a couple of years ago it kind of piped back up. So that was my intro into it. But because it had dropped down, I was into it. I started studying a little bit, listening to Adam Hudson's things, tuning into your thing more recently.
But you jumped from now 217 all the way now. You're talking 2024.
2017 up until now. So I've been putting a little bit. I went from $600 to maybe 6 months ago. I probably worked up to about 60 grand, putting a little bit in over time.
And back into really altcoins again, Matt, or did you start thinking about
basically
Bitcoin?
Basically, in the last like couple of years, I've been pushing heavily into Bitcoin, and that's where the bulk of the investment is, because in my research, and mind you, like I haven't done the 8,000 hours, bajillion hours that everybody says you need to do. Like I do a little bit over time, and then as I do some, I go, okay, I'll put up a little bit more and a little bit more. And for me, that's a pretty big deal to get up to 60 grand. Like 60 grand was more than I had in, say, like my Westpac shares or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's for me at the time, up until really recently, that was a really big deal to have that much money in Bitcoin.
Can I ask you, like, putting that much money in is a lot. It's like there's a 5-figure investment, right? And how did that work though? Because you, with your wife, because you have a wife and a child.
Yeah.
So was there any, I guess, skepticism from her to say, oh, I don't know if you should be putting money into this, or did you bring her along on the journey?
Look, Deb drags me along with a lot of journeys, to be fair. Like, God, I mean, what do we have, like 6 hours? Like, this is a lifetime of stuff, right? Like you mentioned back in the Amazon days, right? Like, I'll just go back. I always just thought I was going to be an IT support guy up until maybe 2015. And it's really Deb that sort of pushed me to say, like, you got to start thinking outside of that. And that's been a huge journey, and one that it's not a straight line. Like, you can support your husband or your wife or whatever and that sort of stuff, but then it gets really scary, and then like your words are supportive, but you're not, but then you come back to being super supportive. So Deb's really one of the people that said, like, you really need to start looking at Bitcoin, even though I was like in Bitcoin and I was doing Bitcoin. And she's like, oh, good, we've got some in at the right time and all that, and excited. But she's, I guess, the one in the last like 6 months that said, you really need to start looking at Bitcoin, which, like I said, I was already looking at Bitcoin, but it's scary to bring that stuff to your partner, because the word is like volatility, and it's not safe, and it's a scam, and that's what you hear.
But why did she then come to you though? She must have seen something that,
well, she's
mind
you,
was like, hang on a second.
She sees you on Instagram every single day. She sees Adam Hudson on Instagram every single day. We both see Michael Sayer all the time. I'll be out mowing the lawn. I'll come in, and on YouTube, she'll be watching Michael Sayer. So a lot of it is based on stuff we see. And like, I learned that lesson from my buddy in 2017. Like, I got to be smart about stuff. I can't just say that guy says something and sort of jump on it. Like, we look at stuff too, and we don't, like, a lot of the advice right now is like, throw everything into Bitcoin. And that's good if you have a lot of stuff to back you up if it falls, right? Because if it falls and you can't draw out of it, you have nothing to live off of it. If it comes down to it, you can't move it out, right? So we are heavily invested in Bitcoin, but, you know, we've spread it out into other things that are, I guess.
Let me ask you about that, Matt, because you just mentioned there that you're heavily invested in Bitcoin. And the reason why I ask these questions is because a lot of people are thinking the same thing, but they're going to put money in that you just said before that you couldn't then take out if it drops.
Yeah.
Right. So is your strategy then, and what I say to people is actually just put money in that you don't need tomorrow. Like, if you can just put money in that you think, hey, I'm not going to need this money for the next, I even say at least 4+ years.
Yeah.
Right. Then you can sort of park that to the side. It was, how are you thinking about it?
The way I think about it evolves all the time, but like, I'll just tell you how much we have in Bitcoin, because I don't want to. It's hovering around the 400 Australian 400 grand is what we have in there now. Like, I mean, I don't know if you want to go to the whole story where the money came from yet. Or if
Absolutely,
you want
I
to
do.
up to that.
I was going to get to that for sure, because it's really interesting. We can jump on it now.
Yeah, we can jump on it now. Like, we sold our house because we're planning on moving from Melbourne to the Gold Coast or northern New South Wales, depending on how
things progress.
How well Matthew sells that, which we were thinking about it anyway. But so we had a big chunk of money, and one of the reasons we did sell, first of all, we wanted to have a lifestyle change from Melbourne anyway, but the money's just locked into a house, and you're paying a mortgage on it, and like, our mortgage wasn't huge to the value of the house, but it's still enough money where it's just sucking all the money out, and it's not really earning. It's not like people say you earn 10% on a house, you know, by the time you sell it, but not when you think about all the money you drop in interest and all that over time anyway. So we got that big chunk of money, and we really had to think about what we wanted to do about it, and we wanted to make it work. So 400 grand roughly in Aussie dollars has gone into Bitcoin,
which is massive. Like, that's a massive investment for people, right? And to come in. So just to paint a picture here, what you've actually done is you've realized that living in Melbourne was average. I was going to say another word then, but not so great.
I like Melbourne. Put it. I don't hate Melbourne, but there's parts of it that
there's better places. Let me just say that there's better places to live. And so what you've done is you've sold your owner-occupied home, right, which you had a lot of equity in. Yes, you've sold that, and now the idea is to use that money to buy in a different location, which is actually more affordable, which is...
Well, we're going to rent. We're going to rent for a few years because we want that money. We want that money locked in different places. We're renting now in a place that we call the resort because it's not a resort at all. Yeah. It's more like, well, we call it that because we're going to be here for a few months before we move up north, but also it's very similar to a very dodgy Airbnb that would have probably 3 stars. Excellent. And then we're going to move up north and rent probably a better place, but we don't want to take the money out and put it into a house. We want it to work as best we can.
Mm-hmm. So you're taking this money, you're now going to go into renting, and then you're going to utilize the money into other things for the time being. Is that right? And part of that has now become
our strategy. And we're constantly revisiting the strategy as well. We're constantly, at least once a day, I look at how it's doing, and I consider other options. Bitcoin is always going to be part of it, though.
Yeah, because I did this exact scenario with somebody else. Okay. And I laid it down because in my online community, these types of issues come up, right? It's like, hang on a second. I'm trying to break out of the 9 to 5. I'm trying to build generational wealth. And a lot of people have all this equity tied up in their home. And I broke down this exact scenario where the person sold the property, they went into renting and then put the leftover money into Bitcoin and then sort of revisit it in like 10, 20 years and what that would look like. I've got the compound interest calculator here, Matt.
I think it was me. I think it was like the day after you spoke to me that you basically put that together.
Oh, really? Just for people who are listening to this, let's just do the numbers. Like, so let's say you had, we can just use rough numbers, like $1 million, let's say. If you had $1 million out of your property, right, you had just cash. Let's say if you dumped $1 million, and now this is now 7 figures. You've gone from 6 figures. I've jumped up to 7 figures. But if you said the money, let's pretend you bought Bitcoin, $1 million worth of Bitcoin, and it was at, Michael Saylor says 29% as a bear case scenario over the next 20 years.
That's the number I've been working with.
Okay, so let's say 20 years. That means that $1 million investment would grow to $162 million, right? And this is incredible, right? Now, let's just say that in 10 years, if I just jump that back a second, in 10 years, you're going to say, 20 years is too long, I'm going to be dead by then. In 10 years' time, is still expected to be upwards of $13 million. Now, that's at Michael Saylor's base case. I actually think, Matt, and other people have said this too, it's probably closer to 50% average, right? Considering that the last 5 or 6 years has been between 50, 60% on compounding. And even 2024, we saw 120% increase in Bitcoin. Okay, so 50% average is not even out of this realm. Considering, especially now, Matt, all the adoption that's coming in with the nation states, the governments, private companies. Now, for those listening at home, $1 million at 50% compounding over 10 years would then get to 57 million in 10 years, right? That is incredible. And all you had to do was do what you're doing. So like, you know what, we love our house, but you know what, we think we can use the money in here better. We're going to go and rent, right? Most people, Matt, would not do what you're doing. This is such a huge gamble. How did you sell? I mean, how does Deb feel about this, doing this together and in taking this big sort of risk, you would say?
You know, it's funny, like everybody's married and everybody has communication issues and nothing's perfect, right? But I would say since we've gone on to this, and we've made the decision to do it, we've never been so comfortable in talking about all these things since then. It has opened up a massive line because it's like something that we both want to go together. I've never been so happy to go back and forth with financial stuff and potential. And even you talk about worst case scenarios, it's just like, and this looks like worst case scenario, possibly this. And if this happens, we can do this. Like, I know, like in the communities that we're in and stuff, it seems like I'm the only driver in this stuff. I would say Dev's like a main driver in a lot of this ways, and other stuff I am, but like, I don't know. It's like we both don't feel satisfied with living like an average life. Like I didn't even realize it until I started moving out and having little bits of moderate success and learnings. And then she sees that and she gets excited about what she's doing, even though she doesn't necessarily love what she's doing. She's having a better time because you can see the long-term upswing in it and the learnings in it. The learnings are huge. The learnings are almost like money in itself, like the way you feel about yourself, that you can start to understand these things because you start doing deep dives and you start pulling it apart and looking at long-term stuff. Like the numbers that you're looking at best case, I don't even look at those. I mean, I look at those as like a sort of a dream thing, but I go from medium to worst case, and then I just do the sliding scale on where I want to put the money. Like if I put it in the easiest option, we're not going to get there. So let's just slide it up with a little bit of risk and see what that looks like, and then we talk about that stuff, and she'll say, look, I think you should do more here and more there, and we'll break it down. It's easily the best we've been. She loves her fancy things. She's always talked in like the car that you have. Ever since you bought it, I haven't heard her not talk about that Mercedes. And
Mercedes AMG.
What's that?
Mercedes AMG.
Yeah,
For those who are listening,
she would
C63.
very much like that stuff. She'd very much like
it's
that
badass.
stuff. And we had a really nice house. And like I said, and how we live in the resort.
Can I just stop you there, Matt? Because you just touched on something really interesting is about the material possessions. And, I've also not had, I've always strived for material possessions because I just thought, I wanted those things. And I think for me it has been cars because I do love cars. I don't, strive for a Louis Vuitton luggage set, for example. Like I wouldn't even think of that. But I would think about cars because I just love cars. But the other thing too is once you get to it, then you've sort of scratched that itch. You're like, okay, well, what's next? So even, of course, a year ago I bought the Mercedes AMG. I'd wanted that car for years and years and years. And even when I was down on my luck and I was driving Uber around trying to make ends meet, I was always dreaming about the Mercedes, right? One day I'm going to get the Mercedes. One day it's going to happen. And then, of course, you eventually get to that position. And I love the car, but it becomes less important. And I think what Bitcoin has done for me in recent times, it's made me want more Bitcoin. So I'm now selling some of my car collection. I'm like, I'm not even driving some of my other cars. I'm not even driving that thing. Who cares? I want more Bitcoin. And, I've got double-digit Bitcoin. And it's funny because no matter how much Bitcoin you get, you think, I want more of it. It's like Michael Saylor's got nearly 500,000 under MicroStrategy. He's not really 500,000 Bitcoin. He's still like, yeah, I'm buying more Bitcoin. Right, I'm getting more Bitcoin. Are you sort of feeling the same? Or you think as you go down this path, like, I need to get more Bitcoin and the material things are less important, or what do you think?
We'll talk about that because that goal setting stuff, and it's more about knowing who you are, right? I did the same thing with 𝗕𝗢𝗧𝗘 that you did, and I thought
I didn't do 𝗕𝗢𝗧𝗘. I didn't do Rick.
Well, you should go do it.
Well, just give us some context though, because people.
I'll keep it in context. I'll keep it in context with this, right?
But what is it though? What is 𝗕𝗢𝗧𝗘? Explain what that is.
So 𝗕𝗢𝗧𝗘 does his Find Your Purpose retreats,
right?
That I did. It was something that we were in a mutual community over at Reliable Education, and he was very much part of it.
Yeah. So you went to that. You found your purpose, or you didn't find your purpose?
You know what? It got me on the track to knowing that that's important. And I'll just swing it back to what you're talking about, material things. Like I've always struggled with that because you get into the wealth building mentorships and all that stuff, and you just think that that's what it all is. And I've always fought back against that because I know that's not what it is for me. And sometimes when I talk about how that's not it, people that are item driven feel like I'm judging them when I'm not. I'm trying to openly talk about how that doesn't drive me. Like I know we've talked about that in the past, and I felt really bad because I felt like I was
slagging off my AMG.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I just struggled because I don't think I have a lot of people to talk to that aren't item driven at all. And it's only that in the last couple of years that I've really understood that I can't work for people. It is so unsatisfying for me, and I like once the initial stage of being employed and the nervousness and trying to prove my point, once that's gone, everything's gone. It's just recently, you know what drives me? And that's not enough. Knowing what you don't want to do isn't enough. I'll tell you what drives me. It's simple. Like I like playing with my dog. I like when my dog drops a ball at my feet and the excitement that she looks, and then I can throw the ball. I love in the morning, I look forward to driving my daughter to school and putting my hand and patting her head and telling her she's awesome. And I look forward to picking her up at the end of the day. And I like when we go on long drives together. So we're going to, last time I had such a good time driving up to the Gold Coast. She's like, let's not take a plane. Let's drive up there. And I'm going, and I'm actually getting a little bit emotional thinking about it. Right. Like, I like my Ford Ranger. I love it. That's enough for me. And the whole thing of this wealth creation thing for me personally, I'm going to be satisfied when I can buy Deb an MG. Well, we can buy an MG for Deb because she likes that stuff. It's important for her to have a luxury car. That's important to her. When I talk about my lack of needing material possessions, I'm not saying that other people are bad, but it's like I try to talk through it, right? Because it's sort of hard in that way. That I want more of that. The wealth is going to get me the ability to spend more time with my dog. Sorry, Teddy. I forgot to mention you too. He's down there.
Yeah. So basically, you've hit something which is right, which is like, everybody's different. And, you are driven by, you would say, just the things that are personal to you, like dropping your daughter at school and things like that. How do you think then building Bitcoin as generational wealth for your children, is that something that you're thinking about?
That's a thing we talk about, and we're excited about that too. Like, the generational wealth is important to obviously because it's a great lifestyle and stuff too, but I didn't really have those opportunities growing up. And I think most people in our generation didn't. I think like my father was a lineman and he was in the lineman union, and it was important to him to be treasurer, and he went to meetings, and that type of business is the longer you work there, the more benefits you get. And, I would ask questions about money or whatever, and he'd be like, you're too young for that, and none of your business sort of stuff. So I didn't come up with any of that. The generational wealth on the money part of it is great, but like my daughter seeing me be at home and run podcasts and run a YouTube channel and openly talk about the business part of it, and me and Deb will talk about Bitcoin and shares and stuff, and her hearing that sort of stuff and knowing that stuff's important too. The generational wealth, the money part of it's great too, but the education and knowing that that's the sort of stuff that you can talk about, because I didn't get that. And that's why I'm 50 now, and I'm really just starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
I would say I've come a long way in the last 5-10 years, especially like being in the groups that we have been. And that's important too. Being in those groups and being around people is a big thing.
Changing people's mindset, right?
Yeah. The chat. And here's the difference. I'll just slightly shift it a little bit. It's a little bit of a pivot, but like for her to see that, it's the same as for me, right? Like, I've always been around people that work 9 to 5. So I struggle having conversations about Bitcoin or running a YouTube channel or finding alternate methods of generating income, because straight away you can feel the judgment that you're some sort of loser scammer or something like that. And so what are you doing for work then? That sort of comes up. But
don't bring up Bitcoin then. Some people are like, that's a scam.
Well, that's right. But all that stuff sort of happens. But the groups that we sort of hang out with, you sort of come in like, okay, I'm going to talk about it. And people are like, oh, tell me more. Oh, have you tried this? And you're like, oh my God. So that's one of the big reasons.
It's more an open, it's more of an open conversation about, wealth generation, whether that's through Bitcoin, whether that's through doing e-commerce, like what I'm doing. I actually still do e-commerce as well, right? I'm still making money in e-commerce. But it's interesting because when you do talk to people, you talk about scams. Now, I used to think that Bitcoin was a total scam, right? And it wasn't until I think up until probably 2019, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was still trying to just like get out of the shithole that I was in at the time. And then, I saw a lot of success through e-commerce, and then I had all this money. And I was like, I'm going to put this now into something. And I've obviously started investigating more into Bitcoin. Went and did a course, right? Got involved in a course. And that was the best thing I ever did, was to get educated on Bitcoin before I even started putting money in. More about how to protect your wealth. Now, one thing that I've gone down this path is the more Bitcoin I buy, the more invested I become, and the more I mentioned before, the more Bitcoin I want to buy. One of the things that I've done, which I thought was something that was not on the cards a few years ago, and this is going to be very controversial for people. They're going to be thinking, oh my God, I can't believe he's done this, is I've moved every single cent of my superannuation over into Bitcoin, right? Under a self-managed super fund. And even as I'm paying, because I pay myself a salary as well, so I've got to pay myself superannuation. So all that additional super that's coming in every month, I'm then putting that back into more Bitcoin, and just growing and growing. And so this is controversial stuff, particularly in Australia, because I know you're just so everyone knows, Matt's, we mentioned before in Melbourne, he's from America, but you know that in Australia, this is major stuff, right? People are just so focused on superannuation, right? And they wouldn't touch it, right? How do you feel? Have you gotten to that point yet where you're thinking, hey, maybe we've got this with the other bag of money sitting over here? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've thought about it and we've talked about it, and I've talked to my accountant about, you know, how to start a superannuation fund, a self-managed fund.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done it yet. You know,
is it something that you would do, or to you is it still scary?
We would consider it for sure, and maybe not even all of it. Maybe the majority of it or something. I'm not sure. I don't think at this stage we dump our entire superannuation into Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. It's something we talk about, but how do I feel about it? Like, I wouldn't judge anybody for doing it. I'd be like, oh, that's your strategy. Whatever your situation is that allows for that. If you think it's a smart, I would assume that they've done their research on it and they've looked at how that would impact them if it goes either way.
Well, the argument, Matt, is that you and Deb have now sold a house and put multiple six figures into Bitcoin, right? Yeah. So if you're that invested, right, would it then just make sense? And this is not a sales pitch to you, right? But I'm just getting you thinking, would you now think, well, now I'm just going to move this other money into the best performing asset as well? Because it becomes down to, I think, conviction for a lot of people, right?
Look, our conviction, we feel pretty comfortable with the Bitcoin that we have at the moment. I think we probably put a little bit more. I don't think we'll be moving our super at the moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's certain things we're waiting for as well. Like, we have some shares and the financial reports are coming out next week, and that's going to impact how we move our money around next week. It could end up being that our superannuation all goes into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know, could be that some of the shares, more of the shares go into Bitcoin.
Hey, just quickly, if you're ready to dive deeper into crypto and Bitcoin and build real wealth, join my free crypto collective community. It's where I share exclusive insights and strategies and live discussions to help you succeed, whether you're a beginner or scaling your portfolio. Click on the link in the description and join us today. Now back to the episode. Yeah, how about this? In the private group that I have, which I know you're in there as well, I did a video, right? Because it's now has just come up to 1 year since I moved my super over to Bitcoin. And so I wanted to look back and compare if I'd left my money in my industry super fund, which was REST, compared to what I've actually seen, right? And I can tell you that under REST, the average was about 10%, thereabouts, right? 10% return over 2024. In Bitcoin, I saw a 50% return, a 50% increase on my money. So just looking at those two things, for me, that was the best decision. Just looking purely at those two metrics, right? Comparing what it would have done if I'd left it in REST Super compared to what I actually did was putting it into Bitcoin. And even if, I mean, the way it's headed, that because I can't touch it, that's the beautiful thing. I think the reason why people do consider putting their money from super into Bitcoin is because they can't touch it anyway. So for example, I say to people, or people might say, look, I don't want to put money into Bitcoin, I can't afford it. But if you said, oh, you can put some of your, all of it or part of your super into Bitcoin, they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that because, well, that's not out of my day-to-day cash flow, right? You've taken money out of your home, right? Sale right to do that, which is great. But other people are not in that position. They may not have a house, or they may not have a house with equity, or they may not want to sell their house, right, to put that into Bitcoin. But they're happy to put the superannuation to Bitcoin. It's like one or the other. Do you know what I mean?
And everybody's situation's different. Like, there's a bit of an urgency now because I just turned 50, right? And it depends on what the life goals are and how much you want. Like, if you've got a bit of money in superannuation and you want to have a villa wherever the most beautiful part of Italy is or whatever, and you've got a bit of, you'd have to, especially if you're young, I suppose you could take the chance on it or whatever and sort of break it if you have to. But I mean, if your life goals are that you need to have all this money to get what you want, then you would definitely have to take that chance with your super. Especially seeing like they're constantly saying, you're saying and Adam's saying and Saylor's saying about over 4 years you never lose, right? So,
that's
it's not life advice, it's not financial advice. Historically, everybody's winning by 40% or something like that.
Well, historically, what we've seen is that if you've held Bitcoin for at least 4 years, right, no matter where you are in the journey, you will not be in the red. You'll be in positive territory, right? Despite the ups and downs. And the things that you actually mentioned before about, a lot of people saying Bitcoin's volatile, right? And unfortunately, when people think volatile, they think downside, but volatile is also upside. So, when Trump, for example, was elected in November, there was volatility in the market to the upside, right? And I think the stats are too, Matt, that there's something like 3 or 4 days of the year where the Bitcoin price spikes. You know what I mean? So you have to, the point is then you've got to be in the market for the whole year to then see those spike periods in a bull market anyway, right? Rather than on the downside. Now, I just touched on Trump, and I know that we have some differing views on Trump, but wouldn't you say, though, that Trump has really been the best thing? Even if you say he's not the best thing for America, he's definitely been the best thing as far as the crypto space is concerned.
Well, that spike that you're talking about on election day, I always think well, that's a mental thing because he didn't actually do anything. So that spike could have happened if people just decided it under Biden, right? And it really is sort of leveled out since then. It hasn't really, it's had some, as far as the Australian dollar, because I go by Australian dollars, I don't even look at the US dollar value, but it's been between 149, 150, 170 and up and down since then.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's been in a consolidation phase. It's moving sideways. But let me just push you on these points, though. I mean, he's been the first president to go to a crypto event where he spoke openly about bringing in a strategic Bitcoin reserve. He's now in government. He's now, funny enough, as the day of recording this, he's been in for 30 days or so. And he's implemented the crypto czar under David Sachs. They've repealed the SARB 121, which is basically now allows banks to custody Bitcoin properly, and many other things that he's done, right? Even proving this point, Matt, other states now, right? States in the US, there's 32 states right now who are all indicating, putting in process some sort of legislation so that they can now hold a Bitcoin or a strategic Bitcoin reserve from a state level to try and front run the federal government.
Yeah, look, I'll say in relation to that, right? I'm hopeful. I agree that he says lots of things, right? And if the people decide it's a bad thing, it's that's just rhetoric. If it ends up being a good thing, well, he said it, so it came true.
I'm talking about policies, though, Matt, that he's implementing.
The things he said. No, I'm hopeful.
And
one of the reasons I've been happy to push money into Bitcoin is because he's putting things in place for Bitcoin to go up, right? And the stuff that he's saying, and exactly right, the policies and all that. I don't like the guy at all, but I think to agree with what your overall point, I believe that he's possibly good for Bitcoin. And it's a big risk that we're putting the house, or at least a good portion of the house, into the policies he's putting forward for Bitcoin. So I hope it is.
We're not putting all the house in.
Yeah,
right?
A good portion of the house.
Yeah, but the thing to think about with Bitcoin is Trump doesn't control Bitcoin, right? He's been good for Bitcoin as far as the policies that he's put forward in adopting, right? But there was countries even before him that, El Salvador, for an example.
Well, even the U.S. is they deregulated a lot of the stuff and people can invest in it. What you're saying is policies around the world are favoring Bitcoin, and I agree with that, yes.
Yeah, and Trump's spearheading it now in a much more positive direction.
Correct.
Prove me wrong. That's what I'm going to say. Prove me wrong.
Like I said, I don't like the guy, but you can't deny the fact that at least what he's saying and what he's proposing is good for Bitcoin. And if it wasn't, I wouldn't be sinking a good portion of the house into it. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. Well, the stuff he's been saying and doing,
It pains you to say. It pains him to say it.
It very look. I'm honest about stuff. Like
I want you to be honest. I want you to be honest.
yeah, I'm honest about stuff. I don't like the guy. I think he's not good for the world, but he's personally. But I think he's good for Bitcoin.
That's fantastic, because I see it a completely opposite point of view. Like, I think he's good for the world. I think, having even the things he's trying to do now, stopping the wars, returning hostages out of Gaza, that's all because of him. And Biden was sitting on the sidelines and did basically fuck all during that whole period. That's just two of the things. And what I do love
I
even more.
certainly am a guest on your podcast.
Yes, and I hope to come on your podcast and you can look. Tell me, you can speak otherwise.
I generally try not to think or talk about it because I have no control, and it just makes me feel sad. So I don't get involved in that stuff too much.
Okay, well, let me move over to this point though. I think that a lot of the thing, what you've seen now is a lot of the Trump initiatives and policies are now spreading throughout the world, and I think to a degree Australia, and I hope that we can see some more economic initiatives in the sense of Bitcoin, right? I haven't seen anything coming out of the Labor Party in Australia regarding anything to do with Bitcoin. I do have some contacts in politics. I asked them, I said, hey, is anything happening? They're like, nope, there's nothing happening. So I think that's poor, because I think we're going to be left behind.
I think Bitcoin. Australian policy, a lot of times they see where the dust is going to settle, and then they sort of jump on it at that point with those sort of things. Definitely in the niche that I'm in, has a lot to do with copyright law around music and AI, and the whole world. And Australia was specifically asked around that, and they said, we're happy with where things are now, which is basically means we're going to see how it goes in the rest of the world. And I think that's probably the same. Why take a chance to see if it's working well and then jump on it then?
Yeah, sure. Hey, you just mentioned AI, and I just want to, we're coming to an end of the conversation, but AI, that's part of your specialty. What do you think is going to be happening in the future when it comes to AI and the Bitcoin space, or crypto at large?
Man, it definitely makes it easier to, like, for right now, I can tell you it makes it easier to do research on it. And I don't just go ahead and ask AI, hey, ChatGPT, should I invest in Bitcoin? Right? Like,
Yes, you should.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
That's what you just do.
should.
And if ChatGPT says, now, like, what I'll do is I'll do things like I'll take transcripts from your podcast, which you can pull a transcript out pretty easily. If not, you can go to a place called Descript, take the video, drop it in. You can go to all kinds of websites, financial reports. You can take what Michael Sayer says. You take all that information and drop it into ChatGPT, and then just ask very specific questions. Don't say, like, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I'll say, in this scenario, based on all the information I just gave you, what's a likely outcome? Okay, what's the worst case? How much of this is what I have to invest historically? And it can look at live information too. I can feed all that information into something called Notebook LM, and I can say, give me a podcast on all these 10 bits of information and sources, make a podcast so I can listen to two people talking about it. And AI will literally have two voices. It'll sound like two humans talking based on the information that you gave it, and it'll just talk about Bitcoin. And then you could take an entire ChatGPT conversation you had, drop it into that same conversation as well.
Wow. So why am I even sitting here talking to you? We could just be plugging this into an AI machine and it just spits out the Matt and Matt show.
Now you're putting me on the spot.
We've been outsourced already. But one of the things I saw the other day was, it was actually on Instagram, and this person was showing the charts, right? And there was some AI tool that was then sort of embedded into the charts, of the price movement, telling them, or maybe it was doing the bidding itself of where to buy, when not to buy, when to sell, etc. And this was all done through this like AI app, right? So you didn't just take the human element out of it. Like maybe that's good, right? Because then you take emotion out of it.
As much as I'm a huge fan of AI, like, I personally, like, I still want to talk to you. I still want to talk to you. I get excited when I get a phone call from you. I don't get excited when I get a call from ChatGPT.
Yeah,
I'm excited about the learnings I get. I'll just say, like, the benefit of AI and ChatGPT is you can learn stuff in the language that you understand stuff. Like, I'll take candlestick charts. I've never really understood them. and I'll say like, are these classic buy signs and sell signs of whatever? And then I'll say, explain to me why. And I don't understand it. And I'll say why I don't understand it. You want to see someone get a human being that understands how frustrating they can get if you're basically asking what they think are stupid questions. ChatGPT doesn't judge me unless it might, because I've trained it to be a little bit sarcastic, but you know, then I can be excited and I come to you and I can have good conversations about that stuff.
You can talk to me about AI and how smart you are, because I wouldn't.
I'll talk to you about baseball and ice hockey, and I'll make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, listen, one last thing is, where can people find you then if they want to research what you're doing?
Well, I've got a YouTube channel, so you can look at me. Well, go to my website at 𝗖𝗢𝗢𝗧𝗘𝗖𝗢. I'll be padding that out a bit more over the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to have a bio there. Like, my LinkedIn profile is really kind of crap. It just talks about the jobs I've done and the work I do, but I've always done.
Everyone wants to see that.
No one does, or everybody does. Everybody assumes LinkedIn, but have I lost you? There you are. Yeah, I'm going to have a proper bio up there. I had a meeting about it yesterday with my assistant. Like, we're going to pad out the about section in my website. But those are the projects I'm involved in right now, is the AI music space and different things with AI. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to leave in the description, I'll leave some links if people want to check out what Matt's doing, particularly maybe he's like some superstar in the music industry and we don't even know it yet. But further than that though, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and also just revealing a lot about your life and what you're doing in the space. I think it's actually quite inspirational, I think, for a lot of people, because there's going to be a lot of people out there, Matt, who, you know, they also want to create generational wealth. Maybe they've got a lot of equity in their home like you do, and they do have an option of selling, but doing that is a big step. So I want to thank you so much for sharing that information. And I'm looking forward to you moving up to the northern rivers of New South Wales and not the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I'll be there for sure. Yes.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Take it easy.
Thanks for having me. I'll appreciate it.
Bye for now. Thanks for tuning in to Crypto Collective. If you've enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. You can also find more of me at I'm Matthew Fraser on all social media platforms.